All right, welcome to your personalized deep dive for today. We've got a quite the mix of news today, from Gaza to severe weather in the U.S., and even a pretty big move from Google in the tech world. We're going to cover it all in under 20 minutes, so buckle up and let's dive right in. First up, we've got the Gaza crisis unfortunately heating up again. A fragile ceasefire shattered, and we're seeing a surge of Israeli airstrikes, leading to a lot of Palestinian casualties, many being women and children.
Yeah, this is a concerning development, especially considering that ceasefire back in January seemed like a real turning point. 17 months this conflict has been dragging on, and now over 400 reported dead after this recent violence. It's a big step backward.
It is, yeah. The sources mentioned stalled hostage negotiations and Hamas's refusal to change the current ceasefire terms as reasons for this escalation. Anything in those details that might explain why this is happening now after things had calmed down a bit?
Well, hostage negotiations are always super delicate, and it seems like the lack of progress there, combined with Hamas not wanting to change the ceasefire agreement, basically created a powder keg situation. Any sign that things aren't moving forward from either side really could easily spark tensions, and well, that's exactly what happened.
Unfortunately, yeah. The international response is also pretty interesting. The U.S. is standing strong behind Israel's actions and putting the blame on Hamas. What could this mean for the global landscape, especially given how divided things already are?
The U.S. taking such a hard stance will likely cause even more division in the international community. We could see tensions rise between countries that support Israel's actions and those who condemn them. This could have a ripple effect on diplomatic relations, could even make it harder to find a peaceful resolution. It's complicated, that's for sure.
It is, and it's truly heartbreaking to see this level of violence and the damage it's causing, especially for civilians. The sources paint a pretty stark picture of the humanitarian crisis unfolding in Gaza, homes destroyed, families displaced, and a constant feeling of fear and uncertainty everywhere.
It's a tragedy, really.
Hmm.
The human cost is impossible to measure. Every number in those reports is a life lost, a family torn apart. It's so important to remember the human stories behind these headlines and the devastating impact this conflict has on people and communities.
Absolutely. All right, let's switch gears for a moment to something closer to home, though no less tragic. A powerful storm system has ripped through the U.S., leaving a trail of destruction and at least 42 people dead across 8 states. Can you give us a sense of just how bad this weather event was?
Well, we're looking at a combination of tornadoes, dust storms, and wildfires, all fueled by one massive storm system. It created a truly devastating event that affected a huge part of the country.
Wow. Some of the specific examples in the sources are really striking. A multi-vehicle pileup in Kansas, caused by a dust storm, a rescue from a Burger King bathroom in Missouri as a tornado raged outside, and the sheer force of those EF4 tornadoes that hit Arkansas. Just terrifying stuff.
Yeah, it really shows the raw power of nature and how vulnerable even buildings can be when faced with this kind of weather. And the effects are widespread. Schools in Oregon closed because of wildfire risk. The Southwest is dealing with ongoing fire dangers. It goes on and on.
The sources also say another powerful storm is already brewing. Do you think this recent event is part of a bigger trend? Like, are we seeing more severe weather these days?
The fact that severe weather events are becoming more frequent and intense is definitely a concern. Scientists have been warning us about the connection between climate change and these extreme weather patterns. And, well, unfortunately, what we're seeing now seems to be confirming those predictions.
Okay, let's move on to a story with some intriguing legal aspects. The deportation of Venezuelan migrants to El Salvador has raised some eyebrows, particularly the mention of a centuries-old law being used to justify it. Can you shed some light on this?
It is definitely fascinating that they would use a law that old. To rely on such an old legal precedent is bound to be questioned. And there are definitely questions about if it even applies in today's world, whether it can be enforced. There's a good chance this could lead to legal challenges that'll test the validity of using such an old law for modern immigration cases.
Yeah, and this story seems to be connected to other things happening with U.S. immigration policy. We have the deportation of Dr. Rashad Alloway, who admitted to supporting Hezbollah, that closing time video released by the White House, which seemed to make light of deportations and increase scrutiny on green card holders. Is there something bigger going on here?
It does seem like there's a shift towards stricter immigration enforcement. These events all happening at the same time suggest a wider trend, and it raises questions about how we balance national security with individual rights. It'll be interesting to see how these policies change things and what long-term impact they have on immigration to the U.S.
All right, let's shift gears to business and tech. Google is making a massive acquisition. buying cybersecurity startup Wiz for $32 billion. That's billion with a B, folks. A clear sign they're serious about this.
This is a huge move. Wiz is really making a name for themselves in cloud security, and Google going all in like this shows how much they want to dominate the cybersecurity space, especially when it comes to the cloud.
But it's not just Google making moves. The Indian stock market is up and down as always. BYD is selling a ton of electric vehicles while Tesla seems to be struggling a little. And the Adani Group just won a big legal case. Plus, we've got the Pine Labs IPO coming up. The business world is a busy place.
It's always in motion, that's for sure. But the Google acquisition highlights something important. Cybersecurity is absolutely critical in a world where digital technology is everything. This acquisition is a sign that Google knows how important it is to protect data and systems from cyber attacks. And everyone should be paying attention.
So true. Speaking of technology changing fast, let's do a quick rundown of some notable tech updates. Apple is releasing encryption upgrades and working on RCS messaging compatibility with Android. Samsung's One UI 7 update is coming to devices soon, and Lenovo just launched a fancy new AI-powered tablet. Plus, rumors are flying about new phones from both Samsung and Google.
Yeah, the tech world is moving at lightning speed. There's always something new, products, features, upgrades, all designed to make things faster, better, and easier to use.
We also have Microsoft adding phone capabilities to their Copilot AI, Zepto promising to deliver Apple products in 10 minutes, talk about instant gratification, and Crown Castle is selling some of its fiber infrastructure. On the global stage, the European Union is forming a group to boost their own semiconductor production. It's a lot to take in.
It is, but it highlights a few major trends. The constant push for faster and more seamless connectivity, the rise of AI in every aspect of tech, and the ever-evolving landscape of mobile devices. It's all happening at once.
It really makes you think about how all this rapid change is impacting our lives. I mean, your phone is about to get even smarter, your internet might get even faster, and the lines between the digital world and the real world are blurring more and more every day.
You're exactly right. It's an era of unprecedented technological advancement, and it's changing everything: how we communicate, how we get information, how we work, shop, even how we manage our health. It's everywhere.
Wow. Well, that wraps up part 1 of our March 18th deep dive.
Yeah, we've covered a lot. But there's still more to come. Welcome back to our deep dive into the March 18th news. Before the break, we were discussing the rapid pace of technological change and how it's affecting us all. It really is incredible how quickly things are evolving.
Yeah, it feels like there's always some new gadget or software update promising to revolutionize everything. Like, take Apple's upcoming encryption upgrades. Stronger encryption sounds great for privacy, but is it really that simple?
Well, you've hit on a key point there. While enhanced encryption is generally good for protecting user data, it also creates challenges for law enforcement when they're investigating crimes. It's that constant balancing act between security and privacy in the digital age.
So how do we strike that balance? It feels like a tug of war where it's not always clear which side should win.
That's a question we all need to consider as a society. How much privacy are we willing to give up for security, and vice versa?
Yeah.
There's no easy answer, and it's a conversation that requires us to really think about the trade-offs involved.
Okay, let's shift gears for a minute and talk about that Zepto story. 10-minute delivery of Apple products. Imagine, like, you want a new iPhone and it's at your door before you can even finish saying instant gratification.
It's a perfect example of how these on-demand services are feeding our need for speed and convenience. But there's always another side to the coin. What are the long-term effects of this kind of model?
Yeah, you're right. I didn't even think about the environmental impact of all those delivery vehicles constantly driving around. And what about jobs? As these services become more automated, what happens to the people who used to do those jobs? It's a bit of a double-edged sword.
Exactly. Every technological advancement comes with potential benefits, but also trade-offs that we need to think about carefully.
Speaking of potential trade-offs, let's talk about David Sachs selling $200 million worth of cryptocurrency right before joining the White House. That timing seems a little suspicious, don't you think?
Yeah, it definitely raised some eyebrows. Selling that much cryptocurrency right before taking a government position makes people wonder about potential conflicts of interest. It's something that deserves a closer look.
Even in the world of cryptocurrency, which is often unregulated, there should still be ethics and transparency, right? This situation shows how important it is to have clear guidelines and accountability, especially when public officials are involved.
Absolutely. And this story could have even wider implications as the government tries to figure out how to regulate the ever-changing world of crypto. It's a complex area with a lot of gray areas, and this highlights the need for clear rules.
All right, let's go back to the international scene for a moment. There's an interesting development in the war in Ukraine. Reports that former President Trump and Russian President Putin have been talking about a ceasefire. Given their history and how complicated this conflict is, what are your thoughts?
Well, it's certainly a surprising turn of events, considering the let's say, challenging relationship between those two leaders and all the different interests involved in the Ukraine war. It's really hard to say what might come of these discussions.
Yeah, it's definitely something to keep an eye on. We'll see if these talks lead to any real progress towards peace. But while we're on the topic of international conflicts, I think it's important to come back to the Gaza crisis. It's easy to get lost in the political arguments, but we can't forget about the human cost of this conflict.
You're absolutely right. It's crucial to remember the human stories at the heart of it all. The sources we've looked at paint a truly devastating picture of Gaza families losing their homes, their jobs, their loved ones. The scale of the humanitarian crisis is huge and deeply concerning.
It's a reminder that behind every news story, every statistic, there are real people whose lives are being turned upside down by these events. We can't allow ourselves to become numb to the suffering we see on the news. We have to hold on to our empathy and our sense of responsibility towards those who are hurting.
Empathy is so important, especially in times of conflict. We have to remember that every life lost, every family forced from their home, is a tragedy. It's through empathy that we connect with the human cost of these conflicts and work towards a more compassionate and peaceful world.
Now let's revisit Google's acquisition of that cybersecurity startup, Wiz. This story goes beyond just business, doesn't it?
Absolutely. This move shows a growing awareness of how crucial cybersecurity is in a world where data breaches and cyber attacks are becoming more common and more sophisticated every day.
It's like we're all carrying around these little digital treasure chests filled with valuable information. There are tons of people out there trying to break into them. It's a little scary when you think about it that way.
That's a great way to put it. And Google buying Wiz shows they're taking this threat seriously and investing heavily in protecting their users' data. But it's not just about big companies like Google. Cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility.
So what can we do as individuals to protect ourselves in this increasingly digital world? It feels like a lot to keep up with.
There are some simple but effective things you can do to stay safe online. Use strong passwords, turn on multi-factor authentication, be careful about phishing scams. A little bit of awareness goes a long way.
Before we finish this part of our deep dive, I want to touch on a story that really highlights community and resilience. The outpouring of support for Joshua Reeb, the person of interest in Sudiksha Kananki's disappearance, it's really heartwarming to see.
It's a case that has captured everyone's attention, and it's amazing to see the community rally around someone who's going through such a tough time. It speaks to the human capacity for compassion and support, even when things are uncertain and difficult.
It reminds us that even in the darkest of times, we can find strength in human connection and in believing in the good in people.
It's a story that's still unfolding, so we'll definitely keep you updated on any new developments. But for now, let's move on to the final part of our deep dive, where we'll tie everything together and leave you with something to think about.
And we're back for the final part of our March 18th deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground today, from conflicts overseas and wild weather here in the U.S. to all the latest tech updates and some really thought-provoking legal stuff.
It's been quite a journey, but as we wrap things up, it's interesting to see some common threads running through all these seemingly unrelated stories.
Yeah, for me, one of the biggest takeaways is this idea of how interconnected everything is. We see it globally, events in one place having a ripple effect across the entire planet.
Exactly, like the Gaza crisis. It's not just contained to that region. It could destabilize the whole Middle East, and the effects could be felt way beyond that. Political alliances, the economy, the way information spreads, it all adds up to this interconnected web. It makes events that seem isolated actually part of something much bigger.
And it's not just on a global scale. Even those other stories we talked about, like the severe weather in the U.S. and Google's big cybersecurity move, they're all connected to bigger trends like climate change and how much we rely on digital technology. It really highlights how intertwined everything has become.
Right, what happens in one part of the world can have a huge impact on everyone else. Understanding this interconnectedness is essential if we want to make sense of the world and address the challenges we face.
Another big thing that stood out to me today is the importance of critical thinking. With so much information out there, it's more important than ever to be able to separate fact from fiction, to question what we hear, and to form our own opinions based on solid information.
It's true. We're bombarded with news and information from all sides, and a lot of it is biased, incomplete, or just plain wrong. We need to develop strong critical thinking skills if we want to navigate this information overload and become informed citizens.
So how do we actually become better critical thinkers? It can feel kind of overwhelming.
Well, it starts with paying attention to where the information's coming from. Who's telling the story? What are their biases? What information might they be leaving out? Don't just take things at face value. Dig a little deeper.
That makes sense. What about seeking out different perspectives? Is that important too?
Absolutely. Don't just rely on one news source or one expert. Look for a variety of viewpoints and be open to having your own ideas challenged. Engaging with different perspectives will help you understand complex issues in a more nuanced way.
It sounds like becoming a more critical thinker is a continuous process, always questioning and refining how we see the world.
Exactly. It's an ongoing journey, but it's essential for being informed and engaged citizens in today's world.
And that's what we're all about here on the Deep Dive, right? Giving our listeners the knowledge and the tools they need to think critically and make sense of this complex world we live in.
That's the goal. We want to empower you to form your own opinions, have thoughtful conversations, and be active participants in creating a better future.
Before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final thought-provoking question. We've talked about the rapid pace of technological change, how interconnected the world is, and the growing need for critical thinking. These are all powerful forces shaping our lives, but how can we use them for good? How can we harness technology to create a more just, equitable, and sustainable world?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's something we all need to think about and work towards. We need to be aware of the potential downsides of technology while also embracing its ability to solve problems and make positive change.
It's a call to action for all of us to think critically, have meaningful conversations, and work together to shape a future where technology is truly serving humanity. What a great note to end on.
We encourage you to keep exploring these topics, engage in thoughtful discussions, and use your knowledge and your voice to make a difference. Every voice matters in shaping the world we want to live in.
And with that, we come to the end of our March 18th Deep Dive. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the news.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.